this may be my favorite hidden gem of this entire year. Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a beautiful day today. My name is Talal and welcome to Popcorn and Soda, the show where we discuss all things movies, pop culture, and so much more. As always, I want to thank each and every one of you for making me a small part of your day. Hunting Matthew Nichols, a found footage thriller slash pseudo documentary film about finding your loved ones and, more importantly, finding closure in extreme circumstances in which there may not have been any closure. And this movie is one of the most fascinating movies I have seen all year, and we're going to get all into that. But for most of you who've been following the channel, and for all of our new listeners, welcome. Number one, you guys know that horror is my absolute favorite genre. Since I was a kid, horror movies have been the one genre that they scare the shit out of me, but also they make you feel. And you guys know how I am when it comes to my reviews of films. It's all about how I feel. It's about what the movie brings out of you. I think that is the beauty of cinema, is that it can make people feel different things, and it's all valid for each specific person. So I love horror movies, and specifically within the horror genre, the found footage genre or subcategory is probably my favorite category within the genre. There's just something so real about it, this level of disbelief that it's everyday people. And once it's done correctly, and let's be honest, it's been done very badly in many movies as well, it can just cause magic to come out of you. And to me, I always say the Blair Witch Project, which is one of the very first movies I remember watching in the horror genre, that movie completely changed the way how I view movies. And it also happened to be a found footage horror movie as well. So when new movies come along in this genre, I feel like that's always going to be the benchmark, for better or for worse, because it's like the first big blockbuster that ever came out on the genre. But I always kind of want to look for movies that innovate and do something different than just your standard cookie cutter found footage movies. Because let's be real, horror is the laziest genre to make a movie in, because all the tropes are there, all the cliches are there, the jump scares, this and that. And I feel like most big studios, if they can like kind of check some of those boxes off, they're cool. They don't really care if the movie's really that great or not, but if they can recoup or make some money in opening weekend on like a Friday the 13th or Halloween or anything, even in the summertime, they're okay with it. So when movies like Hunting Matthew Nichols come along, I'm always interested in it because this genre is my jam. So one of my PR friends reached out and they're like, hey, you got to check this film out. This is going to be right up your alley. And I checked it out and it was right up my alley. This is such a great film. I had such a great time watching this movie. I actually watched it twice. I had a screener of the film and I was just like, whoa, this movie is damn good. And I think a movie like this deserves its flowers, and we're going to get into all of that. So as always, what we do is we'll chat about the things that I really liked about the movie, things that didn't necessarily work for me, and then ultimately, who do I recommend this movie for? So let's start at the very beginning. Hunting Matthew Nichols is directed by Markian Tarasiuk, who I actually had the pleasure of hosting on the Popcorn and Soda podcast, which you can go and watch now. Great guy, just his love of horror, his love of the found footage genre, just from my conversation with him, just leaped off the screen. So he's the director of this film. He's also one of the co-stars in the film, alongside with the star of the film, Miranda MacDougall, who plays Tara Nichols. So what this movie really is about is it's like a cold case movie. It's like one of those Netflix thrillers in which there is a documentary being made by Tara, Markian, who is also her filmmaker buddy, who are exploring this missing persons case of Tara's brother, Matthew Nichols. And in the movie, he disappeared with his friend Jordan on Halloween, when Tara was still a young girl. So she never really had that closure, nor did she ever really understand what happened. And Matthew was a big film fanatic. He wanted to be a filmmaker, I believe, in the film, and he always had his camera alongside with his buddy Jordan. Jordan and Matthew both disappeared in this vast, amazing setting of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, and they were never found. So the movie kind of follows the story of Tara wanting to figure out for herself, now that she's an adult, what really happened. And throughout the movie, it's about an hour and a half. Twists and turns take place, and we get answers. We don't get some answers, but at the end of the day, this movie is very effective in knowing what it is. I'll kind of start off with that. There's 3 things that I really, really loved about this film. And the very first thing that I will say is this movie knows what it is. In this genre of found footage movies, in the space of horror, it's hard to find an identity, right? This movie does something unique where it's a cocktail and a blend of different genres. Like, as I said, it's thriller in many ways. It's got the horror elements. It's a cold case murder mystery in some ways as well. And in other ways, it just literally feels like a documentary. And it kind of blends all of those things in together to create this immersive experience where you're watching the movie and you don't necessarily know what's going to happen next, because they kind of come in and out of different genre within the movie, each maybe like 20, 30 minutes. And I love that about this movie, because you get many different viewpoints, many different takes. And as the story progresses, you get a different movie in many ways throughout the movie. So a big shout out to Markian for having what he wanted truly down and sticking to it. Because speaking to him, this has been a movie that's been 4 or 5 years in the making. And being an independent movie, there's always so many more challenges that come with it. So one of the biggest things that I can say was a massive, massive plus for me is I like the fact that it was a cocktail of different genres, but at the end, it still had its own specific identity, even though it dipped in a different subcategories within the genre. That's number one. The second thing that I really enjoyed about this film is the cast and the acting. As I mentioned, it stars Miranda MacDougall, and as well as Markian, who plays a supporting character. He's one of her friends who is directing this film within the movie. Very meta. Markian is actually the director of the movie, and in the movie, he's playing the director of the movie. But hey, they pull it off. So again, a big shout out to Markian and the rest of the cast, because Miranda MacDougall is a great, great actress in this movie. I thought she carried the movie as Tara Nichols. She was the heart of this movie. And something that I really enjoyed about Miranda's performance in this movie is that she kind of evolves throughout the movie. From where she is at the very start to where she is at the end of the movie, it's almost 2 different characters. And I think Miranda did such a great job of taking us on that journey of seeing the evolution of her character. So she by far is the rock of this film. If that doesn't work, if Tara Nichols doesn't work, the rest of the movie doesn't work either. And she absolutely just nailed this performance. And then on top of that, like I said, the supporting cast, filmmaker, cameraman Ryan, he's part of the crew, Markian, some of the supporting cast, the townsfolk, Tara's mother. There was this police officer who was kind of leading the charge when this entire disappearance occurred. I believe Pam was her name in the movie. She was great. There was some university professor who was like completely cuckoo, but he was great as well. He played that role well. There was the mayor of the town in some of those talking head interviews as well. I thought the cast was so good. And that's what I love about these kinds of independent films is people step up, and you need people to step up because films like this are shot within like less than a month. I think this movie, from what I recall, it may have been shot in like 10 to 12 days, maybe a couple days more or less. But when you have such razor tight margins, when you have such razor tight light resources, you got to make everything count. And everyone came to perform in this film. So that I loved because they carry you throughout this film. And although there's that documentary feel to it in many parts of the movie, it's still in many ways a theatrical movie. And that kind of leads right into the third thing that I love, and that is the cinematography of this film. This is a beautiful film to watch. And that is what I mean. Yes, it's got that documentary feel, but it still has that cinema feel that this is like a film for the movie theaters in which the shots are beautiful, right? So just let's kind of rewind a little. This is a film made by independent directors, teams, actors in terms of them making a passion project. But within the movie itself, these are film students, these are filmmakers, right? And now we're in a generation where people have access to really solid film gear, right? Film equipment, drones, high-end cameras, lightings. And for me, the very first thing that I noticed about this film was how well it was shot and color grading, how well it was lit. And that's a big, big compliment that I can give this film because it doesn't feel janky like it was made on an iPhone. Even if it was, I think that would have been fine. But for the nature of this movie, I think that creating so many different layers within the movie of the talking head interviews, them just chit-chatting in a hotel room, and then actually shooting Vancouver Island in these massive, beautiful drone shots, just amazing camera work and lighting. It brings you into that town. And once you're immersed into a horror movie, you become part of it. And that's what I love about the film, the cinematography of this film, is that you feel like you're in Vancouver Island. Like I'm in Toronto, the other side of the country, but literally watching that movie and watching Vancouver Island, it's like, whoa. Like right on. This is some real good scary stuff. Because anytime there's woods involved and stuff, it's it's already naturally gives you that scare factor to it. And when it's a small town, there's always that little like, hey, is there hidden mysteries in the town? And that's something within the movie. This is like a side piece in which there is the story of Roy Mackenzie, who was this town. It's like a folklore in the town that this person took a bunch of people into the woods. I think he like ended up eating them all or killing them all, turning them into cannibals. And it was one of those town folklores that people tell children. And it's interesting because they take this story of Roy Mackenzie and they implement it into the larger scale. This movie is very, very meta, as I'm trying to make my point. It's a very meta movie where there is a movie within the movie, there's a director within the director of the movie, there is a story of Roy Mackenzie within the movie. And then one thing that I found that was so interesting was that they actually incorporate the Blair Witch Project within the movie, in which Jordan and Matthew became obsessed with that film. In some of the talking head footage, in some of the camera footage from their camcorder, those two loved the movie. And this is the first time I actually saw a movie implement that. This is a very smart movie. It's a very, very smart movie. And that's what I like about it, is that instead of giving us, the audience, the opportunity to be like, oh, that's a cliche, that's another trope, oh, I've seen it, they kind of get ahead of it. And there's some really clever dialogue in the movie. I think one that stands out to me is like, hey, the name Roy Mackenzie, even that sounds fake. I love that about the film, because I think that Smart horror movies are not necessarily in right now. There's been a resurgence in horror movies, absolutely. I feel like over the last 4 or 5 years, even more so the last few years, there's been a lot of really good horror. And I love that because horror movies, when I think of them, my favorites are still the Blair Witch Project, The Ring, Paranormal Activity, The Grudge, The First Exorcist, Conjuring movies, some of the Insidious movies, As Above, So Below. I love those movies. And you don't really get too much of those movies nowadays. So when you see a movie that's smart and when you see a movie that is really pushing the next level of horror, I love it. So that's the last thing I want to say that I really, really enjoyed about this movie. It's very, very smart. Very smart. And that's a big, big plus for a movie like this. Now, things that didn't necessarily work for me. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say because I was really thinking about this because I don't think any movie can ever be perfect. It may be perfect to you, may be perfect to me in certain ways or certain types of genres that just resonate with you. I was really thinking about this film because horror being my favorite genre, I was really thinking about what didn't work for me. And I don't think necessarily that there were things that didn't work for me. There were things in the movie that I think may not work for certain demographic of people. And I'll explain what I mean by that. The very first thing that I'll say is at the start, I said that one of the best things about this movie is that it has its self identity and that it knows what it wants to be. And it's got different blends of genres all within the movie itself. To me, I love that. But I can see how someone would walk into watching Hunting Matthew Nichols and maybe not have the right expectations. This movie is not a true, like, supernatural, crazy horror movie from start to finish. No, it's a very smart, well thought out movie that has twists and turns throughout the movie. So if someone's walking in thinking that from the very start of the movie, you're going to get crazy jump scares, you're going to get all sorts of craziness happening from the beginning to the end, I think you're setting yourself up for disappointment. This movie shines because it knows what it is in the sense of it's a documentary in certain pieces. It is a story about human nature in many ways, following your dreams in many ways, being an outsider. And then you kind of have the horror element attached to that. So if someone goes in thinking, yo, this is going to be Paranormal Activity or this is going to be the Blair Witch Project, I think you're setting yourself up to not be as into the movie because I would say the first 30, 40 minutes of this movie, there's a lot of world building, a lot of story building within the movie itself. And I love that. It worked for me, but I can see how a casual movie fan who doesn't go to the movies like every week like I do would watch a movie like this and be like, wait, what's going on? Where's the scares? Where's that? I think the expectations need to be set going into this movie. And I think it's one of those like double-edged things where I think a movie like this, if you go in kind of blind and not really know what it's all about, I think you'll have a good experience. But then going in like that and being told that it's a horror movie and then some of the crazy horror stuff, which believe me, there definitely is some of that, and it's really, really well done. I think if you're going into it thinking that that is going to be the entire movie, then you're wrong. Because in my conversation with Markian as well, he mentioned how these Netflix thrillers about all of these murder mysteries and these kinds of things, cold cases, was a big influence on the movie. And I can see that. Like, if you watch those documentaries, it's not like from the very get-go all about the killer, this and that, or whatever the supernatural being may be. It's different. It's very different. And I think people should have an expectation that they're going to get a bit of everything. That's the very first thing that I'll say is know your expectations going into this movie. And that's going to be up to you if you decide to watch the trailer that they've put out or going in blind. It'll either work for you or it may not work for you. It definitely did for me. And again, like I said, I'm such a big fan of this movie. Like, it's such a hidden gem for me of this year that it's really contemplating if this is one of my top 10 favorite movies of the year. And I don't say that lightly because this movie's so damn good. I would say the second thing, there's two things. The second thing, and they're kind of tied together. The Blair Witch elephant in the room, although they kind of talk about it in the movie, although that they really kind of, I don't want to say spoof it or anything of the sorts, it's still kind of there, right? It's in the woods. There is scenes in the woods. There are, disappearance, camcorder footage. It's hard to kind of not have your head go straight there. And I think one thing that they did so smart was by incorporating the actual Blair Witch Project film within the movie. Because if that wasn't in there, then I would feel like, okay, this is very Blair Witchy. Like, what's going on here? But I think that the fact they brought that in was super dope. I really did enjoy that piece. But it's going to be there. I think for some people, and I'm willing to give people more credit, movie-going audiences, that they'll get over that. But for a lot of people, they might just be stuck at, hey, this just feels like Blair Witch. Sure, there's elements of it, but once you get past that, there's some real cool stuff in the movie. So that's that. The third thing I'm going to talk about is the ending. And it's a gray area for me. And I'll tell you why. I thought the ending was very bold. Take bold as however you want it. But I almost say it as a compliment in many ways. But sometimes it may not be taken as a compliment. The ending of the movie was intense. I will say that. It's like balls to the walls. Like, it's definitely one of those really, really, bam, we kept everyone waiting. We had a certain genre in the first half, a second different genre in the second, the third, bam, full out horror, which I appreciate. I really appreciate that. They went definitely all out in the ending. The first time I watched the movie, I'm like, felt a little too Blair Witchy to me. I'll be honest, it definitely did. Because I kid you not, I've probably seen Blair Witch like over 100 times. It's one of those like movies when you're a child, like it influences you so much. I've had the director of the Blair Witch on the show. I've had one of the stars of the Blair Witch Project on the show. That movie means a lot to me. So when I was watching this movie for the first time and that ending happens, I'm like, this is really good. But it had shades of the Blair Witch in there. And that was the first time when I watched it. I still really enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. I didn't think that the ending was anything wrong with it. I thought it was bold. There were some crazy things that happened in it. The acting in that end scene, no one can deny it. It's just absolutely amazing. But at the same time, I was kind of like, okay, have I seen this before? So I watched the movie again because I really, really liked this movie. Trust me, I can't emphasize enough how much I like this movie. That ending was in my mind again. And I don't know, maybe the first time I watched it, I was watching it at night. And maybe, I don't know, maybe just from after a long day, you're kind of just maybe talk computing with you as well. I don't know. Second time I watched this movie, and I watched it a couple days after I watched it the first time, I love that ending. I thought that ending was scary AF. That ending was bang. So that's why I'm like, wait, what did I not see the first time that I saw the second? The second time, it was... If you want to get the full experience, watch this movie with a set of over-the-ear earphones, because that's what I did, and the sound design and mixing just made the ending 10 times scarier as well, which I didn't do the first time. So I don't know, maybe that impacted it. But yeah, that was definitely something I enjoyed a lot more the second time. And the second time I watched it, I'm like, dude, this ending is creepy. And I really, really liked it the second time. So I don't know. I wonder if some of you guys who do eventually get the chance to watch this movie feel the same way about it the way I did the first time. I don't know. Maybe not. But I do remember feeling that the first time. But then the second time, I didn't feel it. All right. So the important question, who do I recommend this movie for? And if you're a first-time viewer onto the channel, welcome. And for our existing community here, you all know how I rank movies. It's not on a star level or a number rating. To me, it's one of three things. Is this a movie theater movie? Is this a streaming movie? Or is this kind of like a rainy day movie where you don't know what to put on, you just kind of throw it on in the background, you're like not even paying attention to it half the time? So, interesting, because for me, I have to preface this by I personally, with something that I hate, and it's just a circumstance of the movie theaters in Toronto where I'm around, is watching a horror movie in a movie theater in Toronto is very difficult. And I'll tell you why. Because it's just full of like teenage kids who just want to scream beyond their phones and do this and that. And that kind of takes you away from it because like half the time, like I remember I did the exact same thing, in terms of maybe not the screaming and causing a disturbance, but you're kind of there with your friends, you're watching a horror movie, it's, all exciting, this and that. And I just feel like it sometimes really disrupts the flow and the actual screening itself. So anytime I watch a horror movie in the movie theaters, I go to a VIP screening because it's 18 plus, and then you can kind of avoid that. I would say this is in the sweet spot right between a movie theater movie and a streaming movie. And I'll tell you why. I think a good horror movie can give you all the scares even in your own environment, and that is your home, right? If you have, most people nowadays have a nice TV with a decent sound system, it can immerse you into that movie, no matter what the movie is. So I think a horror movie, especially with the lights off Friday night, nothing beats that. And I think finding a group of friends or family members or whoever you want to watch this movie, or even by yourself, can definitely be a great experience. I also think that this movie shot so beautifully that it can absolutely be a great movie theater experience, because at the end of the day, the movie theaters, it's that like communal space where everyone can enjoy something together and everyone's going to have different reactions to different things. And I think that's absolutely something that you miss somewhat when you're watching it at home as a streaming movie. But honestly, I think either route you go to, I personally, I would watch this in a theater. I absolutely would. But for some people who aren't sure, or maybe horror isn't their cup of tea, I think you can have a great time watching this at home as well. So now I'll get to the important thing. How can you watch this movie? This movie has now recently, in the last month or two, been making its way around different film festivals in North America. I believe it was in a festival here in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, Blood in the Snow. And it's going to continue to keep being shown at different festivals. So I'm hoping that a film like this, and from my conversation with Markian, fingers crossed that this maybe gets some sort of a limited release and then lands on one of the larger streaming platforms, because I really think this movie needs to be seen by a much larger audience. And that's why I kind of want to be like a champion for a film like this and really recommend it. If you are in a town or a city and you find that Hunting Matthew Nichols is playing in a film festival that is in your area, go out and support this movie, because it's such a good, solid, smart movie with scares in it. And I think that people are going to have a really good time with a movie like this because it's a palate cleanser. It's something different. It's not what you expect. And for many, that's going to be a big highlight. And for some, maybe not as much. But I highly, highly recommend, if you do get the opportunity to watch this movie, if it plays in a festival near you, go check it out. And yeah, I'm hoping maybe sometime next year this will get a wider release. I'd love to see it again on a large screen because I haven't seen it in a theater. I only saw a couple screeners of it. And again, big shout out to Markian, Miranda, the entire team, for creating such a unique movie where you can see the passion just leap off the screen. So big shout out to those guys. And again, if you have seen Hunting Matthew Nichols at one of previous screenings at a film festival, please comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the film itself. And, let's talk about the ending in the comments as well. Please leave a little spoiler note in the comments so we don't spoil it for everyone. But I'm curious to think what you guys thought about what actually happened in the ending, because I have my own theories of that as well. But a movie like this, I think we need more discussion about it. We need more chatter about it. We need more engagement about it, because that is how independent, strong films like Hunting Matthew Nichols will hopefully get a larger distribution in which more eyes can be able to watch what a great movie this is. That's it for me, folks. This is my review of Hunting Matthew Nichols. As always, I'd greatly appreciate it if you can take 2 minutes out of your day, 1 minute actually, hit that little subscribe button, click the notification bell, like, share, subscribe, all the fun stuff. And as always, I want to thank each and every one of you for checking out this review, and I will see you next time on Popcorn and Soda.